So welcome Dean Kilby, the founder and scientific director of CELLULAR Health. Educated in biochemistry and biology and studied molecular medicine. Now is the best time to be in medicine with the changes and everything that's exciting that's happening. Thank you for joining us, Dean.
My pleasure. Happy New Year.
Now, what I really would love to go into, and you're into so many fascinating things, and I think this is going to be an amazing year for you and your company and everything that you're involved in. Let's talk about this structural thing that's happening that you mentioned at the beginning around helping cancer patients.
Yeah, so I recently returned from Japan, and so our biotech partners in Japan, they have a very mature approach to cancer treatment. So essentially what happens when you develop cancer and a human being develops cancer, you got these rogue cells that kind of get out of control, and they are no longer growth disinhibited. So if you have cells that just they touch each other, they'll just stop growing. There's only so much space available. There's only so much nutrients available. Cancerous cells, they just keep growing. They keep dividing, right? And so you develop a tumor, you get this mass of cells. It gets to a certain size, that's when it's detectable.
Yeah.
And with our current technologies, if it can be excised surgically, then that's the best option.
Yeah.
Other than that, you've got to use chemotherapeutic approaches.
Yeah, he's actually killing the cells, right?
Yeah, you got to kind of kill either a targeted approach with, if the drugs are available and they're affordable and appropriate for the type of cancer that you've got, then you're lucky. Or radiation therapy that just kind of ablates all fast-growing cells. So, but then the potential risk of that tumor, once it's detected in the next 3 to 5 years, of growing exponentially, it kind of goes like that over time. So you want to be able to detect cancers very, very early. And there are actually technologies now, diagnostic technologies that scientists are using, and it's not that dissimilar to the COVID PCR test.
Yeah.
So you get cells secrete exosomes, and these are little vesicles, not that dissimilar to the coronavirus, where it's got a membrane-bound containment with a whole bunch of different molecules in there. And these are sort of messenger vehicles where cells can communicate with other cells and stimulate them to respond in certain ways. Cancer cells secrete these, and they contain genetic material that has a specific signature to it. So we know enough now to relatively accurately determine that, hey, that's from a cancer cell. So now we can detect cancer way earlier. Now, what do you do about that? Because you can't surgically excise it.
No, it's too small. Right.
So one of the reasons why those cancer cells have started to proliferate is because your immune system, which would normally keep it in check, isn't doing its job properly.
Yeah.
Either the immune cells are compromised in some way, shape, or form. Their cancer killing capabilities are compromised. They're not recognizing the cancer cells, or there's just not enough of them. They're not in high enough numbers. So what you can do, and this is pretty cool, because there's a lot of amazing anti-cancer technologies emerging, and it's phenomenal. I think, even Pfizer said that, within the next sort of 8 years, we'll have mRNA vaccines against, a good number of solid tumors, cancers.
Is that the one with the spray that they were talking about?
Yeah, there's so many different delivery mechanisms and mediums that you can use. But if you can vaccinate, maybe that's an approach that could make a difference, particularly those who have a familial history of cancer. But imagine being able to use what biology's already developed.
Yeah.
And just enhancing it, giving it a helping hand. So you can take someone's blood, take 20 milliliters of someone's blood, and you can isolate specific immune cells that are going to do the job, and you can grow them, let them proliferate in the laboratory to really, really high numbers, and you grow them that's not easy, by the way, to do that. And you grow them in a way where they maintain their cancer killing properties, and then you can activate them and then put them back into that same patient. So there's no risk of rejection. It's their own cells. And then those immune cells just go and do their job. And it's highly, highly effective in stage 1 and 2 cancers, and still can prolong life by a number of months in stages 3 and 4 cancers. It's believed that approach not to be as effective in the more advanced cancers, because those patients have received more chemotherapy and radiation, which is compromised.
To still have healthy cells that can...
Healthy immune cells, yeah. So they haven't had the higher doses of...
So, the technology to grow these cells, is it chemical? How does is it, environment? What is it behind it, or is it the IP?
I mean, a lot of laboratory infrastructure. So, what they've got in Japan is well ahead of everyone else. So what happened, because of the aging population in Japan, the Japanese government, they really wanted to be innovative in their approach to handling that issue. How do we stop people from... We can't afford to look after this many unwell...
I think it's like 90% of the population are over 80 years old.
Is it that bad? Yeah, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So in 2014, they changed the policies around cellular therapies, which means that you only have to take the cell therapy approach to phase 2A or early stages of phase 2B trials, and then after that you can introduce those therapeutic approaches to the market.
Yeah.
And what this allows...
It's just your own body coming back to you, really, isn't it? It's not a chemical or a...
No, that's right.
Instead, it's... Yeah.
That's right. And there's different cellular approaches.
Yeah.
But what that meant was there was this massive investment in laboratory infrastructure to allow for this. So, we're working with this biotech company that's very skilled in that. And so hopefully we can make that more accessible and available to people internationally, outside of Japan.
Is Japan the only country that are doing this, to your knowledge, or is there others?
South Korea.
Australia's not there yet at the moment. Korea, did you say?
Yeah, South Korea and Japan are the 2 countries that lead the way.
Okay. And so why do you think Australia's behind on this side of things?
Oh, goodness. Who knows? We're behind on everything. We're pretty lucky. There's no real demand or...
Yeah, it's just we haven't been pushed to have to look outside what we're currently doing, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's the case. When there's a crisis, then there's real innovation, and then there's openings for action that's innovative and that can actually make a difference. But when there's, we've kind of... life's pretty good even when it's not here in Australia. So,
the numbers are small. Yeah.
But it's not. Everyone's been touched by it.
Yeah, so true. I was just thinking, like, as you were saying it, like, if I was as a parent, and you have so many, like the charity that I'm involved in, a lot of our parents have children that are suffering cancer in hospital, other things as well, but predominantly cancer. And I just think you want to do everything that you can, and you want to be exposed to everything that's possible. And a lot of the times parents are going outside the normal practitioner, and I've known parents that have called doctors overseas to get their opinion on things, and that's what you do. So I'm thinking, this, making this more available internationally is just, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah,
people can choose. People can choose. They don't have to do it, or they can give it a go if they think it makes sense to them.
Yeah, it's not necessarily in this or that, either or. It's there's also a lot of issues with medical tourism where Australians travel overseas for various procedures, whether it be aesthetic, cosmetic dentistry, or augmentation of certain body parts, etc. They come back to Australia, and there's a lot of the time complications, and then the Australian medical system has to handle those complications. So that too is a big issue. So if we can kind of up standards and create, this term travel bubble that kind of emerged during the pandemic. I mean, if there was more of a structured, standardized, safer medical tourism bubble made available, then I think it could make a big difference, because the regulatory environment here in Australia is just, it's not able to keep up with the advancing technologies. And we just haven't yet created the requirement for that sort of approach that Japan and South Korea have taken.
What would we have to do here in Australia to get, the regulations changed? How hard is that?
Well, the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia is one of the most stringent regulatory agencies.
It's a bad thing.
No, I think it's good, and they kind of pride themselves on that.
Yeah.
It's really bloody hard to get anything approved here. I mean, I had a COVID immunity test that was developed by the Batman in Singapore, who trained me in molecular virology, and this was a test that could have had an enormous impact during the pandemic because it measures functional immunity against COVID.
Yeah, wow.
Not just whether or not you have antibodies directed against either the vaccine or other parts of the virus if you've been infected, but do you actually have the specific antibodies that block the virus's ability to bind to cells? Yeah. And we had that, and I ran a validation study in a leading Sydney pathology lab. That was in 2021, and that was fascinating data. And anyway, we've finally got that test, its application into the TGA. That was it took us until the end of July last year. I still haven't heard back from them. So
I know. So they're definitely
very much a waiting game. I'm kind of twiddling my thumbs at the moment, but
Yeah, I've seen some medical startups that have, haven't even been going for 15 years and still haven't done the 2-year testing around what they're doing. And it makes it challenging, which, when you think about all the things that are happening and everything's happening quite quickly, how quickly did COVID move through to the next stage? It wasn't even 2 years before the next strains came out. So I think we need to kind of think what makes it go, how can we be fast and solve issues that we didn't even know existed?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the reasons why, simpler health, the simpler, by the way, is not just because I simplify things. It's also an acronym so it stands for the science of immunometabolic protection, longevity, and regeneration. So kind of encompasses the areas that are of interest to me that I think are of relevance and importance to people. So, if you want to handle your metabolic health, because those that have ill metabolic health are more susceptible to higher or greater symptom severity when infected.
I love it. I think it's a great idea. I think I'm going to start with asking some hard questions and then we'll have to give you a call. But look, I'm looking forward to, what happens with the travel bubble that you're trying to create over there with Japan and the technology that they're testing and using and getting out to the world. It's game changer, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So, hopefully we can set this up setting it up in Bali if it all goes ahead. And why? Because there's an opportunity for us to do so in a special economic zone where we can utilize the regulatory environment of Japan and treat patients true to that, but in an area that's, more Australians travel to.
Yeah, I love it. So you are doing it considering Australians. That's why you're looking at Indonesia, not because of any other reason. Well, obviously there are other reasons, but one of the main reasons is Australians can access it really easily.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
and then if they change the rules here and we were able to get it here, how would that work?
Well, I mean, that's part of my job, is to create those ties between Australian research labs as well. So we can, whilst we're, build the infrastructure and make it available for people, we want to do it in a way where we collect the data, we work with credible scientific research institutions and develop a greater understanding of how it works. How can we refine it? It's always going to be evolving over time. It might be superseded with a different approach. Who knows? Everything is just changing so rapidly. Yeah, but we can't wait because people are suffering now unnecessarily.
Yeah, and cancer's on the rise. It's not decreasing anything. Even
exactly.
more than we've ever known in our entire lives. it's actually worth.
Yeah. So, I invite people to kind of confront the truth about themselves,
Yes.
Examine the conversational space that you traffic in, because there's a lot of untruths. People have no idea. I mean, you just look at what's recommended by the Australian Dietary Guidelines. If you knew anything about nutrition, you'd realize pretty quickly that's why we're all sick.
Yeah. Well, I think the triangle's upside down is from the last thing I read.
It's terrible. And there's crazy. It's like a script from a really bad movie, the way that it's all played out and the various influences involved. But you got to take responsibility for your own well-being, and for those that are struggling and have struggled, then you got to forgive yourself. You got to consider that, look, your body was designed to put weight on. You evolved to be able to do that. It wasn't designed to take the weight off so readily. And we don't live in an environment that supports us to be well. There's just bad food choices everywhere, and there's a good at least 40 years of misinformation. So
yeah, and it's probably until you get it.
It is possible to correct it.
Yeah,
to extend your health span, and be up to something bigger than that. You don't want to spend the rest of your life just worried about your own fat ass all the time. I mean, there's bigger things to get up to and be more concerned about that make more of a difference and are way more fulfilling and satisfying.
True.
As well.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. And it's very painful to be unwell, mentally and physically.
Yeah. And for you and for those around you, and it's disheartening because everyone wants to help everyone else but doesn't know what to do. So the easier option is just to worry about your own lot. But the real freedom when you're out here.
So true. We see people that are free all the time, and whether we envy them or we want to be them, or we pull them down because we that tall poppy syndrome, you've got to think it is possible. If someone else is doing it and it's possible, then why can't it be you?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Dean. I've loved talking to you. I'm hoping we can talk again. If you've loved our conversation today, please leave a comment below. If you want to have an opinion about what we should talk about next, also comment below, but definitely subscribe to the channel. Thank you, Dean, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.